Knowledge that leads to understanding takes time to consume. It takes time to ingest it and absorb it into your being so that your awareness broadens. And as you go through that process of purposefully, willfully, sacrificing personal time to take in information, to better understand yourself, the world, or any other thing, if you don't put in the time, you're going to have an opinion about most things that isn't actually rooted in any practical or foundational knowledge that you have obtained yourself to understand any aspect of what it is that you have an opinion about. And unfortunately, that is the condition that most people function under. They have an opinion. And if you really start to probe into the roots of the opinions that most people have, or what they think, it is highly likely and highly probable their opinion is formulated, what they think has been formulated from something they heard somebody else say. Think about that for a second. And it sounded good to them, so they went with it. Think of how many facets of our world and our lives that people will function that way in, garnering a false perception, an inaccurate understanding of their world and what's really going on in it. In order to rise out of ignorance, you have got to be willing to put in the time. And sadly, most human beings don't see themselves as ignorant. And this isn't a criticism, it's just the reality of it. Most human beings don't recognize the depths of their own ignorance. This applies for all of us. I run into barriers of my own ignorance every day, so it's not like I'm being critical of the rest of the world and not looking at myself at the same time and seeing similar flaws. I'm just speaking to the overall human condition. And yeah, some of us rise above that. Some of us are, for whatever reason, given the ability to rise above that. And as I have wondered, what separates those of us that do rise above that from those of us that do not and stay content being entertained, having our version of reality crafted for us and planted into our head through the TV? What is it that snaps somebody out of that? And inasmuch as I have been able to assess people I know, myself, etc., unfortunately, and I hate to admit this, but I think one of the biggest things that drives the human or motivates the human to begin to ask bigger questions that lead them to a level of knowledge that they didn't possess before, that shifts or broadens their awareness, their comprehension, their understanding, it has to be a lot of pain, suffering, before the human is almost by their own hand or by the world driven to a place of asking bigger questions and having the insatiable desire well up within them to search for the answers, to consume knowledge and information and spit out what tastes like shit, what doesn't work, what doesn't fit, and consume knowledge and information as beings capable of logic, reason, and all the things we're capable of. Well, in order for us to use those things, we have to be taking information into our being. And when you take control of your own self-education, you do yourself a justice that most people won't. Unfortunately, I believe that the deception that we're all seeing is so well thought out, so all-encompassing, and so persistent. And the level of awareness and knowledge and even consciousness of the vast majority of the world is such that this is actually happening. So the fact that it's going on as long as it has, and we're not seeing any major places rising up, we're not seeing anything, as I've said before, it totally and wholly lends itself to the fact that most people are not critically thinking. Most people are not formulating their own opinions. Most people are not critically thinking for themselves, applying logic and reason, and also consuming as much knowledge as they possibly can in an effort to find the truth and to better comprehend what's going on. And these people don't realize that there's a level of deception that is being levied upon the world that is so disgusting that they have to be very, very vigilant and acutely aware of what they're taking in and who's behind the message and the narrative and what those people's ideologies are, both religious and political. And when you combine all that with the ego mechanism that everybody has that needs to make us feel significant, that will do backflips to make us feel like our perception of the world is accurate, this is a problem. This is a real problem, because that's a barrier that was put into the human by our Creator. And then all the barriers that get put into the human by way of the propaganda, indoctrination, lies that are fed to us from the television and all the information that comes off of that flicker box. I really believe that the one thing that's truly going to make people snap out of it and ask bigger questions is pain, suffering, and profound amounts of it, unfortunately. Because I believe that a comfortable mind is a lazy mind, in a lot of respects, for most people. And the things that people tell themselves about having better things to do, I don't have time for that, or all of the other things that people will tell themselves to justify why they're not going to take the time to take in information, to take in knowledge, to consume knowledge that helps to broaden their understanding and comprehension, that helps to broaden their awareness so that they can more accurately perceive their world and what's going on in it. From where I sit, knowing what it is that I do know, unfortunately, this is the condition of most of the world, and it lends itself directly to why the world is in the position that it's in, and as paralyzed as it appears to be. Humans don't trust each other. And you got to wonder what that's all about. Because you can have a conversation with your parents or your brother or your uncle or your friend and tell them, and they won't believe you. And then they're going to want you to tell them all the things that will help them to see it. And if you can't package it in just the right way, it couldn't be true. See, you don't know. And this game goes on. And I've encountered that enough that I've gotten to a point where it's like, short of doing these videos, where people who are of a similar mindset that find them will subscribe and blah, blah, blah. I don't think there's too many people out there that get this, that really get this, that are humble enough within themselves to recognize, wow, I really don't know what's going on. And, well, I'm in a world where I'm responsible for, well, everything about my life. And I don't have the knowledge. How do you get people to know that? How do you show that to people? They have to see that for themselves. And a lot of things that drive the human into seeing things like that is pain, suffering, torment, agony. And I've made many videos complaining and bitching and moaning and whining like a little bitch that this is a construct of suffering, that we were engineered to suffer, all the equations that are built into humans that are very, very, very conducive to the absolute suffering of the human animal. Yep, and all those are true. I still stand behind all of that. And I still find it repugnant. But the more I've looked at humans, I begin to, unfortunately, accept, I have to accept it because it's becoming more and more obvious to me, that unless or until humans are in a profoundly uncomfortable state of pain, suffering, or anything like that, for whatever reason, or a multitude of reasons, humans are fucking lazy unless they're in that position. And they don't start asking the meaningful questions that will give rise to finding the answers that shift perception and perspective, unless or until they're in that state of pain. And that says a lot. And it means that those of us that see what's going on, we're going to have to ride this fucking train with all of the people that don't. And when you're dealing with people who just refuse to believe what other people say, and, there's a whole fucking complex scenario there, but when people who are not in the know hear those of us that are in the know say things that are the reality of what's going on, it's all so goddamn much for them to accept, and the things sound so wild and crazy, and you're dealing with people who don't have a frame of reference to even realize that this is true, on top of the fact many people don't realize the level of evil that's out there actually exists. It creates a situation where at some point, for all of us, you just kind of have to accept it for what it is. You can't force somebody to wake up. You can't force somebody to grow up. You can't force somebody to think in a different way. They have to come to those understandings, and that has to change in them through whatever process it is that opens up in them that gives rise to that. And for most people, it's quite a challenging process, and it takes time. Something that humans don't have a whole lot of at this point. I mean, considering what's going on now, considering the Georgia Guidestones, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Bill Gates and what he is, and all the things that governments have been doing, man, all the writing is on the fucking wall, and we're basically sitting in a situation where people are just either ignorant of it, or if they take it in, they're in denial of it. Because it's all too much. It's all too fucking much. It's almost overwhelming for them. They can't believe it. They can't accept it. They don't want to accept it. And I'm just like rubbing my forehead, just like, come on, people. We all share this fucking collective reality. And being in denial of the reality that's unfolding all around us is just going to make life more painful for all the fucking people that do see that, for whatever reason it is manifested, seem to be faced with an impermeable barrier of helping to wake up the minds of other people, because they have to go through the process of that awakening themselves. It's a very personal thing. It's a very individual thing. And our waking up process is going to be predicated on a lot of the things within our own psychology. And when you're dealing with people who have no fucking clue about psychology or even their own, you're literally dealing with a meat sack that just doesn't know shit right now. And for anybody that hears me say that doesn't, it's like, oh, I'm offended and blah, blah, blah. And then they fire back and you're bad. And they immediately look for a flaw in you and try to flip it back on you and say, well, it's all, I'm so sick and tired of that little fucking tappy dance. My life has brought me to the place that I'm at for whatever reason. And I'm just kind of really easing into the acceptance of the fact that there's not going to be an immune system response. There's not going to be a global rising up. There's not, at least this version, this go around. Maybe towards the end of the year when they start cranking this fucking thing again and people begin to see the writing on the wall, maybe then they'll see it. Maybe then there'll be enough pain injected into their lives and enough suffering and all that other stuff, and the writing will have gotten bigger and more bright. And maybe then they'll see it. But for right now, it seems pretty obvious that most people don't see it because we're not seeing the global awakening. We might be seeing the stage being set for it. We might be seeing the pressure points being set up and poked at right now. And this could be what leads to a global awakening. I want to be able to see that the potential for the global awakening that humanity needs to take place in order for this to not destroy us. I got to hold a space in my heart and in my mind that's possible, that something could happen. 100th monkey, the creator himself. But right now, I'm not going to hold my breath for that because the trajectory that we're on in the current state of awareness and consciousness and knowledge and comprehension of all of this is at such a low level for the vast majority of people. And one of the biggest contributing factors to that is these fucking people believe what they're hearing coming off the television. They just haven't taken in the information that gives them the clarity and comprehension of who owns Hollywood, who owns the media, who built it all, the agendas they push forth, the narratives they push forth, the ideologies of the people who control it, both political and religious. They just don't know. And unless or until somebody acquires that comprehension, they'll never really have a doubt or a reason to wholly doubt what comes off the TV. They'll never have a reason or a basis from which to know that the television has been used as a weapon so efficiently, because most people have seen it as a mechanism of entertainment, and therefore they don't look at it for what it actually is. That's a really awesome weapon. When you can use something like the television to so profoundly influence the minds of the people who watch it and literally craft their reality for them, and they don't even know that it's happening. They don't even realize that it's happening. So at the same time, they don't realize that all this is happening. Their mind, their perception, so much is being molded for them and crafted for them. And as I've said in so many of the videos that I've done, if I can control your mind, your ass is going to follow, eventually. I'm just coming to really accept, deeply accept, you're not going to wake up anybody that's not willing to, that's not ready to, that's not psychologically at that place or hasn't had enough pain injected into their life to cause them to begin to ask the bigger questions. The idea, the concept, casting pearls among swine, that metaphor and what it means, it's very true. Until I woke up, I was in the category of the swine. You could have told me and I wouldn't have seen it. I wouldn't have known. It wouldn't have meant much to me. It wasn't until I woke up and I began to search for my own pearls that I began to string together my own pearl necklace. You see what I'm saying? There's just a difference. When the swine, and I say this in a metaphor because I was the swine, and people throughout my 20s casted me lots of pearls, and I didn't know what to do with them. Even in my early 30s, I had a few good pearls stored. I didn't know. But once I experienced enough pain, I began to fucking wake up and ask bigger questions. Then I literally left the swine dynamic and became a human being on the search for knowledge and understanding of himself and began acquiring my own pearls. And when you acquire your own pearls through your own diligent research and literally just putting in the time to evolve your mind, to evolve your comprehension of the world, to evolve yourself in every way and any way that you possibly can influence that, you gain a long string of pearls. And when you start casting those pearls to other people who are in the swine mode, you're wasting your time, no matter how pure your intentions are, or no matter how good of a heart you have. Until they're ready to eat meat, there's milk for babes. Think about that. Until they're ready to eat meat, there's milk for babes. And apparently there's a lot of people on this planet that are grown adults that are still babes, that still need their milk fed to them. And if you say the wrong thing to these people, if you happen to have an attitude about it because you're frustrated, most of them will knee-jerk response to you being arrogant, full of yourself, stuck in your ego, or pick your fucking version of how they'll invert it and try to flip it on you and immediately point out a flaw in you. This is the way they do it. This is the way the game works. When you're playing the game with psychological or emotional children, or someone who's just so fucking ignorant, lack of knowledge, all of us were there at once, so fucking ignorant that they just can't get out of their own fucking way. And unfortunately, a lot of people are in that condition. And when you're dealing with people who don't even know where to go to look for the information, it's just like, fuck, how do you spoon feed all these people all the information that they would need to know? You can't. You can't. Unless you have categorized and itemized every single solitary piece of information that you've taken in so that you have a reference for it and you can go back and begin to hand it to them in a very scripted or prescribed way of taking this information because you need to know this in order to know the next step. There's a whole process that the vast majority of the world apparently hasn't gone through. So, those of us that have, I guess we're the ones that are going to be the contributors to this 100th monkey thing, if it's even real. Seems like there's evidence of it with the monkeys off the islands of Japan and the rats in New York City where they've done studies on this stuff. So I guess those of us that see if there's anything that's contributing to the 100th monkey, it would be those of us. And at some point, if we reach a critical mass, that it starts to spread to the rest of the world? Or what? The only other thing I can think of is something outside of this world, God, whatever, something, helping to create a mass awakening by, I don't know, blasting the earth with some frequencies that have an effect on the genetics of the human and their mind begins to open. I know that's getting out there in the woo-woo land, but at this point, when we look at the options, there are few. I mean, it's really looking like checkmate for humanity. And unfortunately, most people don't realize it. They just don't realize if we're not at checkmate, we're at check. And we've got to do something to prevent checkmate. And if we're in checkmate, we got to find a way to kill the queen or something, in the metaphor of the chess game. And the interesting thing is people don't realize that this is a spiritual war. They just don't. And in a spiritual war, they have to tell you. So I've become very much aware of this in the last several months. In a spiritual war, they have to tell you. They have to. It's part of the rules, even though they don't follow the rules. And maybe they're not telling us everything. They're telling us a lot. And when you're dealing with people who don't even realize that all the information's out there, they just got to look for it. Again, another brick wall, another barrier. All of the information that we're going to need, for the most part, it's out there. All the information that gives any human being what they need to understand the reality of the world they live in is out there. And we tend to think, oh, they're hiding this, they're hiding that. Well, they do hide what they're doing behind a closed door. But funny enough, they write about it. They write publications about it and make very public, make them public. They make sure that we have the ability to know. And those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear kind of thing, get that? And people find it. And then they figure out a real big piece of what's going on according to what they find, and they share it with the world. For me, it's been 15 years of gathering nuggets and pieces and pearls, and seeing the tapestry that all of that information paints before your eyes. Most people that have a good understanding of what's going on have probably experienced some version of what I said. Pain, a lot of suffering. They ask bigger questions, and it opened a Pandora's box. And unless you're willing to consume that information and go through, take the time, invest the time to consume and ingest the knowledge that gives rise to broadening your awareness, and on until the human takes that first step. Every pearl you cast will be fruitless.